Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brisbane City Council meeting of May 23rd, 2017. We're having a special meeting tonight on the Brisbane Baylands, and if you would please rise and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Please note for the record that all council members are present.
Thank you. Do we have number 3 is adoption of agenda? Okay.
Second.
We talking about this?
Yes, well, that's the outline. The agenda is the noticed agenda, which is exactly the public hearing schedule. So we have it was...
Yeah, I don't have
Okay.
a copy of that either.
It was in our inboxes. Perhaps the city clerk can print out extra copies of the agenda. Thank you.
Or grab
So we
my
have
box.
we have a motion and a second by Terry O'Connell. So all those in favor?
No, actually, that's not, I didn't second. I made the motion.
I second.
And somebody else seconded, but I think Clark and I did it
You did it at the same
Conjunct.
time. Okay, well,
at the same time.
okay, so we'll give the motion to
It doesn't matter.
Terry and the second to Clark. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, public hearing, Brisbane Baylands planning applications, Baylands concept plans, Brisbane Baylands specific plan, case SP-01-06, general plan amendments, cases GP-01-06, GP-01-10, and related final environmental impact report. The specific topic this evening includes the applicant presentation by Universal Paragon Corporation. So I'll allow UPC to give the opening comments, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. We are very appreciative that the Council is devoting this evening to hearing from the applicant and our consultants. And what we are proposing for the format for tonight is following some initial comments by myself. There'll be short presentations, 5 to 8 minutes, by 2 groups of 4 of our sub-consultants in areas that you yourselves, your Planning Commission, and your community have expressed most concern about. We'll have those, what we would propose as those 4 consultants after my initial comments, and then followed by at least a 30-minute question and answer session concentrated on those first 4 topics from Council, followed by the second 4 and closing comments by myself, and a second 30-minute period. That should leave plenty of time for public comment and questions afterwards. And with that, if I would be happy to proceed.
Sure.
Thank you very much. The consultant team behind me, who you'll be introduced one at a time, I've actually been corrected. I thought they had more than 200 years collective experience. But actually it's much more than that. So the folks you'll hear from tonight have collective experience working in their chosen field of expertise for almost as long as we have been a nation. And that's extraordinary. Most of them have actually worked for over 10 years on this project. And so what you'll hear first from WRT, our land planners, Biohabitats, Brown and Caldwell, and then GI Energy. And you'll hear next after your questions and comments for the first 4 from Geosyntec, BKF Engineers, GraphCon, and EPS. And we've tried to group those 2 in areas that make the most sense in terms of content. The EIR that you're considering, the project proposal you're considering, was initiated in 2005. The first EIR scoping sessions were initiated in 2006. This has been going on for many, many years. Some of the milestones are before you, beginning with site tours that we began to help provide some site perspective to the community and other stakeholders in 2006 that continue today. A critical 3-year period that initiated by council for community workshops, a speaker series, and forums to educate the community about issues of great care. 2006 to 2009, which actually resulted in the CPP recommendation that was made at the end of 2009. And then a host of community forums, Clean Tech Crossroads Conference that we sponsored largely in response to Brisbane's aspirations to be leaders in that area in 2007, leading up to many such events like that today. Again, trying to be an open forum for discussions with experts in their chosen fields about the issues that Brisbane cares about. I wanted to go through a couple of personal thoughts about Brisbane, having worked here with you for a dozen years on this project. What's always inspired me about Brisbane is that it's a city created by and for ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things. And it's no surprise that the folks who came here, starting after the 1906 quake, were able to piece their own homes together on $100 or $300 lots from sometimes as little as scrap wood and tar paper during and after the Great Depression. And during World War I, those same workers who mined rock in the quarry to build our naval bases and weld the Liberty ships that helped liberate Europe from evil really came from this community and communities like it around the Bay Area. And this is particularly prescient given some of the challenges that we're facing in the world today. Brisbane built housing for these workers, and I saw a statistic in the Brisbane history books that during the Depression, almost 400 homes were built during the early years of the Depression, which was quite a rate at that time. Some say the city doubled in size over that time. This rapid change was uncomfortable, but the city did its part. And, well, the question I would ask is, what sets Brisbane and the Bay Area apart from the rest of the country? Well, I'd submit it's that we think different. We adapt to change, and today the Bay Area is doing what it's always done. It's changing as fast as it ever has, only what we're responding to is a little different. The war we're fighting today is the war to fight and cure diseases like cancer and AIDS that's happening right next door with the biotech cluster in South San Francisco. Our clean technology firms are working to eliminate our need for oil and stop climate change. Our leaders in Sacramento set climate policy about the time that this EIR was initiated that is now a worldwide benchmark for climate reduction. But as we rise to meet these challenges and the best and brightest from around the world come here seeking opportunity, we really are running out of places for them to work, live, and play. Now, UPC developed a plan to solve this problem, and it responds to both Brisbane's drive to clean up legacy pollution on the Baylands site and move the needle on climate change by building the most sustainable project in America. That's what you ask for, and that's what we want to deliver. We know that our vision and plan has frustrated many in Brisbane because it contains housing. We know that. We own that. We take responsibility for that. But to be clear, we didn't push housing and transit near jobs in the Baylands to ignore the city's objective to create the most sustainable project. We did it because every reputable expert and policymaker on climate change and the environment agrees that building housing near jobs and transit is the most sustainable way forward for sites like this. The debate is over in that area. That's why the state of California has asked that 80% of new growth be built in priority development areas like the one you have around the Bayshore Station. We also did it to help project the project economics, support the tremendous community benefits that are desired here. And so a lot of those we'll discuss in a few minutes, but before we proceed, I just wanted to give a quote from William Pollard, who said, "Without change, there is no innovation, creativity, or incentive for improvement. And those who initiate change will have a better opportunity to manage the change that is inevitable. Those who initiate change will have a better opportunity to manage the change that is inevitable." Change is constant in the Bay Area, whether we like it or not, and Brisbane has a chance to shape it. Indeed, that's what you're doing, and accomplish its objectives, preserves what makes the city special, and meet some of the greatest challenges of our age. Now, most of the attributes of the project, we're not here to reintroduce to you. You're long familiar with what we believe are the great benefits of the project, having a regional transit hub with 90% of the development within a 5 to 10 minute walk of multiple modes of transit. Many benefits, again, responding to years of community input around being a center for education on restoration ecology, zero net energy consumption, hundreds of acres of open space and open area, hiking trails, biking trails, and facilities that include a 2-mile extension of the Bay Trail, land for a high school, much needed retail services, and though there is great debate, of course, between regional and local priorities, 4,400 housing units to address the housing shortage. Our sustainability summary plan was in our specific plan that was revised in 2011 to include some of the key elements that have been described, but we're also endeavoring to understand what some of the aspirations of the sustainability framework mean as they're translated into a project like this, and we've been spending a lot of time on that. And this is critical for us because we understand what a bar and that Brisbane sets for this, and how much being branded, if you will, like South City has become branded as the biotech city, that it would be a really great thing if Brisbane could be the green tech city, or the environmental technology city, or the innovation hub city with the future development of the Baylands. And just for the record, before we move on, I want to note that the 1973 buffalo roast here in downtown Brisbane was not, here's our plan, which you're very familiar with. I won't go over it again, but that buffalo roast apparently made it to the Guinness Book of World Records. And I just want to note for the record that that's Anya Miller on the left, who was serving back in September 1973 at that time, and with that little reminder, I'll just on a more serious note say that this truly is one of the most well-considered, longest environmental reviews for a project of its type in California history. It's complicated. It certainly deserves a consideration. But one of the reasons we're very grateful for the time tonight is that we ask you to consider expert conclusions and community opinion before making your informed decision. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first consultants. You're going to hear from WRT Biohabitats, Brown and Caldwell, and GI Energy first, and later from Geosyntec, BKF, GraphCon, and EPS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm very honored to be here tonight to talk about our involvement in the plan. My name is Jim Stickley. I am with Wallace, Roberts, and Todd, known as WRT, and we have been the land planner on this project for over a decade, over a dozen years. I've actually been working on this for longer than Jonathan has been here. So I just want to talk a little bit about our involvement on the plan and the approach that we've taken to develop the plan that's under review today. WRT is a land planning and urban planning firm that has been around for over 50 years. We have a long history of working with communities, both on the private developer side, but also with the public agency side. In fact, most of our work is on the public agency side. Across the bottom, you can see sort of the timeline of different projects that we've worked on over those 50 years, starting with our original sort of legacy project, which was the replanning of the Baltimore Inner Harbor, and then working up through a plan that we developed for Mission Bay in 1975, Downtown Oakland Plan, 1989, Lake Merritt Master Plan in 2002, Brisbane Baylands Specific Plan in 2011. It's actually misstated here. As Jonathan said. So we have that history, and I think there are two things I wanted to highlight that our firm tries to bring to the table in our community planning work. One is an ecologically based approach, and that started with our founder, Ian McHarg, who wrote this book, Design with Nature, and that's sort of an underlying DNA for our process when we look at a site, is what's the underlying ecology, what was the underlying ecology, and how does that inform future planning decisions. And the second thing is building community through placemaking. So we're not building some generic thing, but we're building a community that has a real sense of place, and that sense of place is rooted in not only ecology, but it's rooted in the sort of the social and cultural makeup of its context. So I think those are the two things that we try to distinguish our work with. So I wanted to talk just for a couple minutes about how that approach has led to this plan that's under review now, and what the structure of this plan is. And I think the basic underlying premise of this plan is that it responds to context. And so on a site that is this big and this complicated, almost 540 acres, there's a lot of different context influences. There are natural, ecological influences. There are also built influences, infrastructure, surrounding neighborhoods, surrounding urban areas to the north, and so forth. And so, whether we're responding to some of the very special ecological assets in the south, like the lagoon, the tidal channel, Icehouse Hill, and that sort of directing our approach in the southern part of the site. In the north, those context influence are different. They're about adjacent neighborhoods and commercial areas and infrastructure and transit, very importantly, transit, both existing transit in the 3rd Street Light Rail, the Caltrain, Samtrans, but also the proposed BRT line that will connect from Hunters Point to Balboa BART Station. So the plan is about responding to those different contexts. So in the southern portion of the plan, there's really an open space influences that seeks to stitch together those ecological assets of lagoon, tidal channel, Icehouse Hill, and creates a broader matrix of public open space, but that is interspersed with a couple of other things. There's a solar farm that forms a buffer between the large Central Park and the Kinder Morgan fuel depot. And then there are some sites for very low density campus sites along the eastern edge. But predominantly in the south, there's an open space influence. In the center, it's a little bit different. This is getting a little closer to transit now. There's still open space that is integrated and interwoven with development, but this development tends to be lower density. So it's 2, 3, maybe up to 4 stories, but generally low density development, but with a sort of a heavy infusion of public open space. And specifically, the 2 public space elements are the Creek Park that comes along here on the west side, terminating in the Roundhouse Green, and then the central quad here on the east side, around which some of the low-density campus sites are clustered. And then in the north, where am I pointing to? There we go. In the north, it's different again. Here there's heavy influence of existing infrastructure and of transit resources, including the planned BRT line. This is the place to cluster density and take advantage of that transit. And in so doing, address some of the regional jobs housing balance, but also create a neighborhood in the north area which fosters a living and working environment. And so there's quite high densities, compressed, if you will, in the northern part of the site that takes advantage of the transit resources and the infrastructure resources. So that's the basic structure of the plan. I wanted to just touch briefly on what it feels like in each of those areas. So starting in the south, this is a before view of the edge of the lagoon. You're all very familiar with this view. This is looking west along the north edge of the lagoon. The proposal for this is a park that would encourage passive recreation, a place to experience nature and ecology. And this would characterize a lot of the open space that's proposed in the southern portion of the project from the tidal channel southward, even though there are some land uses, as I mentioned before, the solar farm and the limited number of campus sites. Most of the area in the southern portion would be passive recreation, similar in character to this. There would be a small bit of active recreation, perhaps in the southern part of the, some ball fields and things like that. But mostly passive recreational open space that's very eco-friendly. In the central portion of the site, this is the current situation. I think many of you, if not all, are familiar with the soil recycling operation that occurs there now. So this is looking south now from the central portion of the site, looking to the southwest, southeast rather. Sorry. And so what you see here is the lower density campus sites, 2, 3, perhaps up to 4-story campus sites, but with as I said before, a strong infusion of public open space. This would be the central green that extends southward, connecting to the tidal channel park, and then the larger recreational park south of that I told you before. And then this is the northern portion of the site. This is now with the Caltrain station here in the central foreground, and then looking south towards San Bruno Mountain and the town of Brisbane. And this is the proposed view of that area. So you, as I said before, you have density really concentrated around the transit. These are office, R&D space, very close to the transit. And then as you go out away from that to the west, stepping down a little bit, you can see to the right here some housing and some other commercial and also some opportunities for different kinds of retail, mostly ground floor retail within a mixed-use environment. And then finally, this is a view in that area, the higher density transit oriented. So we're standing here looking northward. We have the Caltrain station on our right, and the future view of this would be this mixed-use neighborhood. So this is where living and working are sort of cohabitating in the same district, just a mix of those uses where it's a lively neighborhood that is enlivened by the mix of uses, retail on the ground floor, some residential, some office, very transparent ground floor uses, etc., and someplace that feels safe to walk and pleasant and not dominated by cars. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Pete.
Good evening. My name is Pete Munoz, ecological engineer with Biohabitats. Much of our work over the last decade with UPC has been working on this project to explore and identify opportunities of natural system design elements in the redevelopment areas, as well as restoring ecological function by enhancing habitat, ecological features in more of the natural areas. Biohabitats is a national expert in integrating green infrastructure and ecological systems in redevelopment projects. We were early adopters of LEED and SITES, Green Living Building Challenge, those type of green building framework. And really our work took a deep dive into the science and ecological function of these systems. Much of our staff over half of our staff are technical scientists, so we really come at it from that approach. As well as creative ways of reconnecting community with our infrastructure, both in the natural and built environment. One example that I think illustrates this is some of our design work on the Far Rockaways. This is an area in New York that was devastated by Hurricane Sandy. We worked with an integrated design team to develop shoreline ecosystems that were resilient to storm surges, as well as including endangered species habitat and other open spaces. And I think what's interesting about us creating a community like this is it has multiple functions. So it does define open space. It does protect against storm surges by creating a multitude of shoreline ecosystems. But it also becomes the backbone of the built infrastructure. So it invites that connection to some of the more conventional stormwater infrastructure, and thus creates a kind of a stacked benefit or solution multipliers in design. That's very much similar to a lot of our other work, and was clearly the intent of the framework in the specific plan. Creating stacked benefits, so they're not just open space, but we're increasing biodiversity, we're conserving water, enhancing ecosystem function, promoting sustainable mobility, and creating vibrant culture and economy. And of course, we're starting from a place that's fairly disturbed. Right? This is an artificial landscape created by our conventional roadway system and the landfill. And this is a challenge that our company is very familiar with, probably best compared to some of our work with the Fresh Kills landfill. Historically one of the largest landfills in the world. We did a lot of habitat enhancement at Fresh Kills landfill, including upland and marsh habitat, similar to what we'll be doing or what's planned here at Brisbane Baylands. And the work that we're proposing at Brisbane Baylands is certainly, we're not doing this in a vacuum. There are a whole host of regional experts that are looking at what are the best things from an ecological perspective around the Bay Area. These are just a couple of the recent reports that have come out, and I'll highlight a little bit more specific interventions that they recommend. And the two areas that we're primarily been focused on in some of our work is that Center Visitation Creek area, and looking at not only creating open space, but broadening the floodplain and increasing ecological function around that east-west corridor. The other area that we've been looking at is really the north shore of the lagoon that was just shown earlier. And this is maybe one of the biggest opportunities in creating ecological uplift on the site, is creating some transition zone habitat that's desperately needed in the Bay Area. And some of that transition zone habitat is something that a bunch of recent studies around the Bay Area have concluded that this is of need. Just to unpack that a little bit, transition zone habitat is really from that upland into the marsh plain in tidal influenced areas. And some of the concepts that we've looked at is increasing the width between the roadway and the water's edge, creating a gentler slope so that you have more opportunity for biodiversity and habitat, as well as invasive species removal, native plantings, and the like. We've reviewed these concepts. Our team has reviewed them with other regional experts, as well as with regulatory agencies, the BCDC, and they're all in line with kind of best practices moving forward in the region. And that concludes my portion. Thank you.
I'm Bill Feist. I'm with Brown and Caldwell. My title now is Senior Fellow. I've been with the company over 40 years. And our focus was on potable water and recycled water for this. Potential water sources in California's future, and then what fits for the Baylands. And Brown and Caldwell is a California-based firm. We started in San Francisco 70 years ago, and we've been doing water work starting on the West Coast, now all across the country, doing a lot of green infrastructure projects with various levels of public benefit. I would point out we're doing work for, have done work for Bauska, on your representative of SFPUC, on water conservation plans and water efficiency use, looking at how different programs could benefit the communities and improve their water use. Mm-hmm. And another example, we're working with the San Diego Clean Water Project on direct and indirect potable reuse now. So we do a wide range of work on water, but in a continuum from water through wastewater and back to potable water, as is appropriate for the community.
Can you please speak a little closer into the microphone, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. There we go. Here's just an example. I'll throw a couple quick examples. This is a project we did in the Southeast, which is a LEED certified implementation, recycled water for irrigation, and then also recycled water for cooling water, so getting multiple benefits out of your recycled water. And here's a smaller project up in Woodlands, California, where we worked out the facilities that are providing recycled water for a biomass power generation facility. And along the way, getting the water there, we're also doing park irrigation now and also future agricultural irrigation. The challenge for the Baylands was to come up with something that we think will let the Baylands be a microcosm for water efficiency. Growing populations need water, and everybody's competing for that limited resource. So we're looking at focusing on possible solutions, new or transfer of existing potable water, and also making new water. Sometimes you hear it referred to as purple pipe. First, the best use of the existing potable water. You want to look at retrofitting existing facilities, installing new equipment with maximum efficiency, and then monitoring that system. It's a living system where you need to keep on top of it to be sure you continue to use it efficiently. Things happen, pipes leak, you want to get those. And then finally looking at transfer of unused water rights. Where could this new water come from? Because Brisbane has used up all its allocation through Bauska from SFPUC. We went through a water planning process in line with what's required by the state of California. Water supply project planning through SB 610. We looked at a variety of alternatives with different levels of efficiency. Some of these, the early ones, A, B, and C, were in line with what BAUSCA was doing, and then we got into programs that would involve more recycling and higher efficiency use of water to get a very water efficient profile together. We looked at opportunities for the Brisbane and for the Baylands. There were a lot of things we looked at that just were not feasible given the geographical and geological characteristics of the community. Rainwater harvesting, no place to store it. Fog harvesting, giant Christo sheets on the sides of the hills probably wouldn't work. There's no groundwater to develop. We looked at desalting there isn't any example, there is no brackish groundwater to desalt, and desalting the bay water would have ecological consequences. So we focused on recycling wastewater and then also on transferring water rights. You can take that recycled wastewater and you can irrigate with it, you can use it as cooling water, it can be used to restore wetlands, you can flush toilets with it. And all these things, if you're following the trends, for example, in San Francisco, a lot of these things are reality now. If you go to the PUC building, you'll see that they're doing a lot of these things for recycling right on site and transferring of water rights. As far as recycling goes, we worked with Biohabitat or their predecessor and our experts to come up with a low-impact, eco-friendly approach that doesn't use a lot of energy, uses natural systems. If you look to the lower right there, you'll see an example of an open water wetland where you're depending on sunlight and the plants, natural systems, the bugs that grow on the plants to remove potential contaminants from the water and ultimately come up with a product that is perfectly appropriate for the end uses. And then finally, the last part of this puzzle is where's the water going to come from, the potable water. And UPC has done the prospecting for and facilitated a potential transfer in Central Valley to move unused irrigation water rights to SFPUC so that SFPUC could deliver more water not only for the Baylands but also for the community of Brisbane. You're out of water for other things you may already want to do in the community, so there is not only the base amount for the Baylands but also potential water for other community needs.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Thank you for having me. My name is David Yanni. I'm with GI Energy. GI Energy is I apologize, the slide's a little messed up here, but GI Energy is a developer of sustainable energy resources. We focus on looking at a technology-agnostic view of what's out there, how can be brought to bear, with a specific goal of marrying technologies and supply to actual demand. So not building big wind farms or solar farms, but really focusing on looking at what a facility's energy use is and then marrying up the different technologies around that. So, as I said, we're a full-service provider. We take everything from energy master planning all the way through construction, installation, and ongoing services. Our approach is really to look at things from the very beginning and make sure that we're actually building systems that will do what we need them to do what our customers and clients need them to do, but also operate efficiently and allow us to optimize them over time. One of the things about the energy industry is that it is an incredibly dynamic marketplace. Technologies are changing, financing is changing, the needs of communities is changing. So we need to actually ensure that everything we do on every project we do is forward-looking and can actually plan for these future changes that are going to really impact everything that all of us do. I'll skip through that. Walk through a couple of case studies, and then I'll talk specifically about our approach for this site. We're currently working with a neighboring site up the Hunters Point Candlestick Point shipyard, and our role is really on the entire Sustainable Infrastructure Master Plan. So it's delivering renewable energy, recycled water, and a large geo-exchange HVAC system to really be the centerpiece of this eco-district that is looking to ensure that we can bring in, as I said before, all of the new technologies that are currently under development, but build something that's flexible enough that it'll last 50 years and that we can actually continue to innovate as the community develops and stay here for the long term. We've just finished a project in New York City with Cornell University. We've done the geo-exchange system underpinning their new STEM campus built on Roosevelt Island. The original concept for the Bloomberg building, which is the first building that went up, was to be a net zero energy building. The only way that was going to be accomplished was by having a geo-exchange system to handle the HVAC of it. And we're continuing to work with them on looking at the rest of the build out of the campus and ensuring that we meet those goals that both Cornell University has, but also the City of New York has. Also in New York, we're working with Con Edison on piloting one of their first energy storage projects. The concept here is to really understand how energy storage can provide services both to the legacy grid and the infrastructure that's already built there, but also provide services to end-use customers and the regional transmission operators. So understanding how secondary markets come into play and how innovative and long-term financing can actually help unlock some of the potential behind these technologies. And finally, we were a pioneer in developing Connecticut's microgrid program. We just completed about a month ago commissioning the first microgrid in the state of Connecticut, working with the city of Hartford on combining a load pocket involving a school, a grocery store, and a gas station that during large-scale power outages can actually provide an area of refuge, groceries, and fuel to the local community. So it's really that concept of ensuring that whatever we build needs to have an economic rationale, but it also has to have a community benefit that can actually provide services that would otherwise not be there. Our approach for the site is fairly simple. The way we look at it first is when you're planning for long-term innovations in the energy sector, what we've sort of all agreed upon in the industry is that we need to electrify everything we can. We need to get away from using natural gas or fossil fuels for thermal energy. So the first step is to ensure that we've electrified systems that would otherwise be consuming fossil fuels. Then we look at how we can actually combine a variety of loads to create a diversity that allows us to use the same equipment to serve multiple uses. And this is where these mixed-use developments are just phenomenal from an energy planning perspective. By having residential and commercial use, you can use the same equipment essentially 24 hours a day. And when, instead of having to build redundant systems in disparate areas, we can actually use that same kilowatt hour, that same BTU of energy over and over again throughout the 24-hour period to meet a variety of uses. And that's really why we'd like this approach of trying to build district-wide systems that meet residential, commercial, R&D, and in some cases industrial and healthcare needs. Next, we look at, once we've electrified everything, we want to ensure that we're getting our electricity from as carbon-free sources as possible. So one of the easy things to do is to actually just secure off-site RECs, and that's really been the approach that's been done for the past 20, 30 years. And that will take you so far. So there is enough projects out there that we could actually buy those RECs from to apply a credit. But that's not really the remediation that we are trying to do on greenhouse gas emissions long term. It's about building renewable systems at the source of use. So once we've done that, then we want to maximize our use of on-site renewable energy, and that's through photovoltaics and wind where feasible. Then when we've got that, we want to deal with the issue that we have with overproduction and with the import from the grid by ensuring that we're installing enough energy storage to both increase our utilization factor of the renewable energy, but also minimize our off-site power import and provide potential other services like backup power and other sort of resiliency benefits. And then finally, and this is a big one for this site, because we've electrified the thermal demand, we want to ensure that the systems that are producing that thermal energy are as efficient as possible. And one of the most efficient ways to produce heating and cooling is through a geo-exchange system. It has the benefit of creating highly efficient chillers and heat pumps, but it also has the added benefit of reducing a significant amount of water usage that would normally go to mechanical cooling. So that's really a key piece of looking at this entire holistic approach and saying, where can we pull all the different levers to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce the environmental impact of a site like this? And then we focus on resiliency. by being able to come in from the ground up and looking at a site and not having to necessarily deal with all the legacy infrastructure you find in some urban infill environments or other universities and college campuses, we can actually take the long-term approach. We can design a grid that will actually accommodate the renewable energy components that we're looking to put on, but also will be flexible enough to be the smart grid of the future. And I put that in quotes because a lot of people are still talking about what exactly that entails. But it's about marrying supply and demand locally. It's about putting in storage, maximizing the use of renewables, but also providing a certain amount of resiliency for the community so that during major grid outages and events, we can actually provide places for people to essentially have refuge in place, to shelter in place. And that's a big added benefit of these renewable energy systems. And finally, we need to make sure that this actually can pay for itself. One of the guiding principles of the work that we do is ensuring that everything we do has a rational economic benefit. And for some of these higher cost systems, some of these more innovative systems, there is a large upfront cost. But it can be paid for when you look at the entire life cycle of an operation. So when we start to broaden our time horizon from 5 years to 10 years to 15, 20, 30 years, you can start to unlock some very innovative low-cost financing. We work with a number of different infrastructure funds, really focusing on being able to deliver today benefits that may not actually accrete for 30 years and utilize innovative financing to ensure that we can do the right thing by our communities, by the municipalities that we serve, and by our end-use customers. That's essentially it, and we're looking forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get your name again? I didn't catch it.
Oh, sure. It's David Yanni, and I'm with Chief Development Officer for GI Energy.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, great. Did you want to come back up and say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We were hoping at this time to take as up to a half an hour period, longer if you'd like, for questions from council directed at myself or any of the consultants that have spoken thus far on the content that they spoke about.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone like to ask some questions? Any questions?
I had a couple.
Okay.
Pete, if you could please, you showed your picture up there. As I understood it, you're talking about encroaching into the lagoon with something. Is that?
Yeah, so currently the north edge of the lagoon has fairly steep slopes, and so the transition between kind of upland to aquatic habitat is pretty steep. So the typically way of developing transition habitat is making that slope shallower. And so that's usually done by a balance of cutting back into upland areas and filling aquatic areas. Since this is a landfill site, there's a lot of it's problematic to dig deep in and go up. So some of our early concepts were filling portions of the lagoon, and we reviewed those with the BCDC, the regulatory agency that regulates the first 100 feet of the water's edge, and that's very much in line with other restoration projects they have. Is if you're doing habitat enhancement, they're allowing for those fill activities.
And you know that are aware that that's probably the least amount of dirt on top of that portion, where the fill you go down and you're into garbage.
Yes.
Much right away.
Yep.
So how would you propose to deal with that?
In terms of excavating into upland areas?
Methodology.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point in doing a little more fill. Is we're not digging into those upland areas.
Okay. All right. And at least according to the map that I saw, is current lagoon road configuration is still in place?
Yes.
Is that really?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
I don't know if anybody else has questions for Pete.
I have one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you just, you touched a little bit on transition zone habitat and like what you propose it to look like. And you were mentioning that there's a big need for that type of habitat in the Bay Area. Can you just kind of go a little bit deeper as to why that type of habitat is important?
Sure. This is very much true of all of our urban waterways. Is we've eliminated the ecotone, right? The space between different ecosystems. So in most of our urban areas, and very much true around the bay, is we have aquatic areas and upland areas, and the spaces in between are very few and far between. So that's kind of the largest need, is creating very shallow areas that get inundated with tidal fluctuation to create habitat that we've lost over time.
Anything else?
I do for somebody else, but I don't know if anybody else has.
Okay. Anything else for this consultant?
Yeah, I have some questions.
Okay.
For you. So, thank you for your presentation.
You can stay up there, I think.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
these questions are directed at you. So,
Is your mic
in
on?
regards to sea level rise.
Check your mic.
Oh, you know, it's not on. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in regards to sea level rise, so we have this channel that's coming through, and you just talked about it a little bit. So, yeah, if you could just explain to me how you have this channel coming through the landfill. It's going to be lower than the surrounding area. It's got to flow into the bay eventually. And so how does that, explain a little, briefly, the protection of the channel with the garbage that's below it?
Sure. So for sea level rise is certainly an important consideration, and we've looked at that on the lagoon side, because that's where there's going to be more impact with sea level rise and bay elevation. It's less of a concern on Visitation Creek because you're at such a higher elevation and you're coming down to it. So I think we've taken a closer look on the lagoon edge versus the Visitation Creek area.
Okay, and then just in dealing with the contamination that's in the landfill where the creek is. So so I mean you have these layers of fill going down to the base of the creek. So how deep of separation from the bottom of the creek bed to where the lining would be?
Sure. It's going to vary a little bit, and I think a lot of times when we look at green infrastructure in an urban area, we're looking at infiltrating water, so that we're not creating runoff and erosion and those things. Certainly in an area like this, we need to understand the underground layers and widening the ecological flow of water across the site. So it will vary depending on creek bottom versus the floodplain. And I think that's kind of the balance that we need to create within the 100 or so floodplain width of that entire corridor.
Okay. And then you talked about the Fresh Kills landfill in New York. So what type of development has occurred since that closure happened?
Yeah, this particular project was focused on open space and public access and more of a park. And the restoration was focused on creating a space that was safe and inviting for the community in there and increasing habitat and biodiversity.
Okay. So, but no buildings at that site?
Correct, not at that site.
Okay. And, do you have a explanation on why that was the case?
It's just an area that the city of New York, who is the client in this case, wasn't looking at developing that. They're looking at more of creating more open space. New York has enough, I think, developed areas.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Terry, did you have any questions?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Clark?
Yeah. Have Bill Sykes? Yeah. It's kind of a simple one. I didn't, when you were showing your presentation, Bill, I didn't catch the location. Excuse me, got bad allergies. For the recycled water plant, is that?
It's along the creek. It's beside the creek channel.
Is that next to the railroad tracks currently, in between that and Tunnel Avenue, or the location maybe?
Yes, just to clarify, the location for the recycled water plant is on the northwest corner of the creek next to the railroad tracks, so before it
Okay.
crosses under the railroad.
Okay, all right.
And so that would be south, Councilor Conway, south of the area that's proposed for the relocation, or that was originally proposed for the relocation of Sierra Point Lumber.
Oh, yeah, okay.
South of their site.
South of there.
South of their site, north of the northern edge of the creek on the west side.
Okay. All right, that gives me an idea. Thank you for that. And then one quick one.
course.
Did you have a defined elevation for that, or is it just more in concept right now from a aerial level?
The short answer is we didn't get into defining the elevation
Okay.
as part of the overall land use, but it will be an appropriate elevation for the hydraulics of the site
Okay, yeah. I was
And it
just
will-
curious
yeah.
about that. All right,
and
that makes
out
sense.
of the floodplain.
Thank you. Anybody else have?
Yeah, I have some questions for Bill.
Bill.
For Bill. Alright.
Don't run away.
So in one of your slides, you had it looked like it was showed different levels of efficiency, and you chose the second one to the end. I guess it was level C or
Level
item C.
D.
It was level D that you chose.
Yeah.
So okay, so level E was the next one. So why wasn't that one chosen? I'm just assuming it was more stringent on water efficiency.
Well, there's some differences in water efficiency between the two alternatives. There also, in some cases, if you go to the efficiency of one, certain things you would say you flush with recycled water in the buildings, then E might be using zero flow urinals and toilets. So there was some overlap where you get into areas where if you do D, you don't need to do E because you're using recycled water already.
Okay.
And there's
So-
would be ample recycled water available, so you don't need to close that loop any tighter.
Okay. Do you see some areas of UPC's plan where you would use non-flowing urinals?
I think that Jonathan may want to address the details on how far some of these things go.
We haven't gotten to that level of detail. I think the driving principle was that actually we're looking for a constant demand for the recycled water, which one of which is the very low flow flushes of urinals.
Mm-hmm.
We would certainly entertain going for waterless urinals in commercial buildings, but it would have an impact on the volume of recycled water that could be utilized in the landscape on the back end.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense. Bill, you talked about recycling water on site. Could you just give us a brief description of how that occurred?
Well, in this case, we identified a low-tech way of recycling water, putting in a low-tech, eco-friendly recycling plant that would generate all the recycled water you need. In some of the areas in downtown San Francisco, they're following up. There's a trend that started probably 30 years ago in Tokyo, in the Ginza area, and they realized that it was going to be hugely expensive to tear up their existing streets to provide more water supply as they went up higher with the buildings and to handle sewage flow.
Mm-hmm.
And so the city of Tokyo dictated that you had to use gray water or recycled water to flush toilets and for cooling water, and they did that by putting small treatment plants in the basements of the buildings that were very highly efficient. Some of that's now being done in San Francisco. But on this site, when you're starting, you don't have that constraint of dealing with you're putting in new infrastructure that's appropriate to the site, and and you're using a low-tech system that's very low energy use. You can do stuff in the basement of a building, but then the energy use goes up. So it's also a balancing act.
All right. And are you familiar with water recycling facilities, like sewage treatment facilities, that will take the black water and do urban biomass, capabilities to turn that into energy and the solids?
There are a lot of very innovative things for people are trying to figure out how to run fuel cells on wastewater.
Mm-hmm.
But those technologies are evolving now. Maybe they're in the future at this site or some other site, but we went with technologies that were innovative yet proven. So there are some other things that are happening, and the industry is continually evolving. So, and this project has an extended build out, so other things may come to pass or come to fruition. Some of them very rapidly. It might be appropriate.
Sure.
We have proven facilities that are very efficient, energy-wise, water-wise, and then we know they'll work. They won't be there have been some very interesting things. Somebody tried to grow water hyacinth for wastewater treatment in Hercules, and they had a frost, and everything died. Mm. So we're doing things that are proven and appropriate for the Bay Area and appropriate for this site.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Bill. And I did have a question for Pete again, and there was in regards to there was a couple of slides that showed the lagoon and the edge of the lagoon. Currently, right now, there's the rocks. So in your slides, like this one right here, so the rocks are gone, and there's a nice tidal marsh. So I've been told that the rocks are there that's part of the remediation to keep the
so the rocks are there primarily to dissipate energy with a lot of wind action that blows the water and tidal flow on that edge. So with steep slopes, you need rocks to protect that. When you have very gentle slopes and a lot of vegetation, they do the exact same thing, but they create habitat and they're nicer to look at.
Okay, so the rocks aren't really there to provide a barrier from the waste that's in the landfill from getting into the
no, they're to dissipate tidal and wave energy.
That's all. Okay. So then those rocks could be removed and with proper Clark. Thank you. With proper planning, then you could have a water's edge that looks like this.
Yes.
Okay, and that would be all the way around the lagoon? I guess probably where the railroad tracks are located, that's pretty steep. You probably would have to continue keeping the rocks there, but I guess other areas you could rehabilitate.
Sure, the steeper the slope, the more difficult it is to create the vegetated zone needed to do that. So what we're looking is really that northern edge where you have some good opportunity, but that's the area that we've just focused on.
Okay, and then did you also address the creek that flows into the lagoon and rehabilitating that?
Not specifically. Certainly that's the major input in this, other than the tidal influence on the other side. But we haven't looked at restoration activities up the creek.
Okay, but that could be added on as part of the overall.
It could be. I don't know how much of that is part of this parcel, but absolutely I think there's opportunity there.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other questions of any of the consultants?
I have one for David.
Okay.
David.
Sure.
David, during your presentation, you were referring to the boxes, I think, Bloom power cells.
Mm-hmm.
Bloom boxes, is that what they're called?
Yep.
That's like an uninterruptible power supply.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is the life cycle on those? Do they have one?
So the way they're being designed now, and fuel cell technology has changed pretty drastically over the past 10 or 15 years. Essentially, their entire system, the reason we actually like Bloom a lot, is they've built a box that all the pieces that essentially degrade over time can be swapped out. It can be swapped out very quickly. Mm-hmm. So the actual fuel cells, when you open up a Bloom box, it's actually just a stack of these little ceramic cells over and over and over again. And over time, those ceramic cells, which actually produce the electricity through flowing the hydrogen over them, and then the electrodes that actually make that work in the chemical reaction there, they start to degrade, and they need to go back to the shop and basically be reprinted with the electrode ink and then firmed up if the ceramic has actually degraded a bit. All those pieces are hot swappable, so they can actually open up an existing a Bloom unit that's out at a site deployed, essentially spin it around, keep the rest of the the system operating and swap out that one box in about an hour or so. I would encourage anyone who hasn't actually been to their facility in Sunnyvale. They do great tours down there. They'll show you their technology. They'll show you how it actually works. So if you just left them there and you didn't do anything, they start to degrade after about 5 to 7 years as far as the efficiency going down. But the way that they've developed their maintenance plans is that they continually swap out the products, the pieces inside, so that you can actually maintain the same output over the life of the system. And the box itself on the outside can last 30, 40 years.
Okay. And what happens to the byproduct of the swapped out ceramic disc?
So they reuse it. So they'll take their cells back to their facility. They'll reprint. The first thing that goes is the electrode that's actually printed on in an ink form. That's the first thing that goes. So they take the exact same cells, they'll reprint them and then swap them back out. So it's because the ceramic is one of the most expensive pieces of their equipment. They endeavor to actually utilize as much as they can over and over and over again.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
Okay, yeah, I have some questions.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Dave.
Oh, thank you.
For the presentation. So, we've talked a lot about, yeah. We've talked a lot about zero net energy, zero net emission buildings. In our framework, we show a couple of examples. The technology seems to be getting better and better all the time. Not too long ago, it looked like only a one-story or maybe a two-story building could be zero net energy. Now we're looking at taller buildings. So where is the technology right now, and where do you see it going in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years?
So it's the technology right now, to your point, is, it can support economically. I mean, if you take economics out of it, you can make any building a zero energy building. But from an actual economic perspective, in a market like Northern California, you still are limited to 4, 5, 6-story buildings in a relatively small footprint, so maybe a couple 100,000 square feet. Where I think a lot of the innovations are happening right now in the industry is on looking beyond a single building footprint and looking at these district scale systems. And just going back to my comment about the mixed use sites being really prime for this kind of approach, is that when you look at a commercial facility that has a really high energy density usage, to be able to create a really efficient system with, let's say, just one unit of commercial, you need a heavier weighting of residential to be matched to that.
Balance it out.
So you can balance it out.
So you're looking at an overall development, zero net emission, zero net energy.
Exactly, and that's going to be the most
building by building, because they have different uses.
Yeah, building by building, you get to the point where, and I don't think that's where we're going to continue as an industry, is focusing on building by building. I think the way the utility markets are changing with the various shades of deregulation, we're taking a much more systematic approach and looking at district scale and campus sites, because you can design a building as efficiently as possible, but there's things that start to creep as the building gets commissioned and people operate it. So you're never going to have the most efficient system in a single-use building. By really broadening that use and marrying, high-density commercial with lots of residential next to it, you can balance out some of that diversity of load. And if if the loads aren't exactly what you thought on one building, you've got enough diversity there that you can ensure that you've got a fully balanced system.
Okay, all right. And then Title 24 is going to require that all residential be ZNE by 2020?
Yeah, so we've been talking to the CEC, the California Energy Commission, about what exactly that means. As of right now, on their drawing board, it essentially means they're going to require a certain amount of solar PV per square foot of residential. They're trying to iterate that with the industry to try to figure out what actually is reasonable. But so we're working on a number of developments in the state that have planning horizons that go into the 2030s, and some of them even longer. So the direction we've gotten from the CEC is assume that regulation is going to really be about watts of PV per square foot, and then go from there. And then if you can start to build around it, then great. But that's going to be the baseline.
Okay, and then commercial is supposed to be 2030.
Same thing. I think by the time we get to 2030, they're going to be putting more of a reliance on storage, because even 2-3 years ago, storage was not where it is today. I think what Elon Musk has done with Tesla, and then everyone else is kind of following along, we're seeing that cost of storage go down and down and down. And as the regulatory markets become more mature, and that was, I mentioned our project, and it's about really defining what the energy storage market is at the wholesale level, at the regional level. So I think those trends, along with the technology becoming more efficient and more cost effective, are going to probably make that commercial, that 2030 date, a lot more stringent than the 2021 is as the markets catch up.
Sure, okay. And then, you talked about a variety of different ways to get alternative energy on site, of course, solar, and you mentioned wind. We talked a little bit about, perhaps if the technology is there in regards to treating the wastewater and using those solids. South San Francisco Scavenger Company, they collect all of our green waste, and anaerobic digestion facility turns that into compressed natural gas, and that fuels all of their trucks that pick up our garbage here. Are you familiar with some of those types of facilities, and could some type of facility on a scale that is appropriate for the Baylands, be appropriate for that site?
It could. So we actually, and we looked at something very similar for the Hunters Point project and tried to really understand, could we utilize the wastewater treatment systems there to provide energy? The issue you have there is that even at developments of this scale, so hundreds of acres, millions of square feet, you're still not getting a whole lot of energy content out of the wastewater. So as an example, for that entire Hunters Point shipyard development, the 400 acres on the northeast portion of it, if we collected all the wastewater and centralized it there, we might be able to get 200 or 300 kilowatts of production out of it. So it's really not a huge energy source at that scale. When you see large municipal wastewater treatment plants that serve hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people, you start to see a lot more of the benefit there. The other issue is when you start to treat the waste on site, especially the blackwater waste, and you've got the effluent at the end of it, disposing of that becomes its own issue. There's an economic issue around it. There's also an environmental issue around it. Contra Costa County right now, they're going through an RFP process actually to readdress their entire wastewater treatment plant, their energy system tied with it, and their biggest concern is they can't find an economic solution to get the waste off-site once they've treated it, and that's one of their big concerns. That's why they're actually going out to the market right now for a solution.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because you start to hear some of these closed-loop systems, and maybe that's not really feasible in this type of area.
It could as a demonstration. I think as the technology itself becomes more broader based and the cost of that type of technology comes down, it's a very specialized technology right now. It's really just for large municipal wastewater treatment plants. As that starts to get down, you may be able to have economic plays on a lower volume of the waste stream and producing energy from that. It's not there yet, but it could be retrofitted later on if the market allowed it to happen.
Okay. And then you talked about energy storage facilities. So could you just
Sure.
touch a little bit more?
Start off with batteries. That's sort of the most straightforward play, is to look at just how can we install batteries there. And again, that comes down to the cost of energy storage has come down and understanding all the different pieces that go around it. So it's not just about smoothing out your renewables and the intermittency there. It's about some of the arbitrage between low cost, cleaner energy in the evening and higher cost, sort of the marginal generation plants that cost more and produce more GHG during the daytime. There's about serving regional markets, ensuring that the grid itself is stable. And then during outages, you can use that stored energy for limited amounts of time, coupled with integrated building management systems and load shedding to provide critical loads. That's one piece of it. There's also opportunities on thermal energy storage. And if you haven't been to, I'm giving you guys a bunch of tours to go on, but if you haven't been down to Stanford recently, you should. You should see their new energy plant there. They pulled out their CHP system, which had been the centerpiece of their energy plant for 20, 30 years, and have replaced it with massive amounts of thermal energy storage, hot water storage, chilled water storage, and that's reduced their GHG footprint remarkably. It's an expensive system. It costs them $500 million, but it's really where the future is going, and they're creating another benchmark of how you look at an integrated campus, look at the thermal energy needs, and provide. I said before, trying to use the same BTU of energy over and over and over again. Unlike a kilowatt hour, you use it once and it's kind of gone.
Yeah.
You can capture some heat off it, but a BTU can really be reused if you do it efficiently. If you take some of the heat out of the water and then recycle it, and then you create energy loops that connect the diversified loads. There's a lot of innovative things you can do, and it's really about understanding what the goals are, what the economics dictate, and how much load you can connect into a single aggregated source.
Okay, so Stanford did this not because of economics, but because this is something that's important to them.
Their long-term economic play will work. Part of it, and this isn't a popular thing down there, but part of it was they reduced their engineering staff by 50% by going to this system. So they're saving on employee hours. We're working with Ford on one of their sites in Michigan, and that's one of their concerns as well, is they want to reduce sort of their hours on engineers, but there's obviously a difficult interplay there with local employment, those kind of jobs that are important to the communities. And, at a certain point, you may not want to go to the most efficient system you have if it means that you're going to put people out of jobs. So there's a balance there.
There is a balance. And just one last thing, you talked about life cycle economics, basically, looking at a 30-year plus horizon. I'm glad that that's part of, your model, what you try and instill in your clients to look at that type of long-term vision. So really all the things that you're highlighting here are looking at long-term economic feasibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you have the upfront costs, but over the long term, it becomes economically viable.
Yeah, and that's where the innovation on the financial side has been picking up steam over the past 5-10 years. Unfortunately, in this country, we've been very poor at putting together really good public-private partnerships. That's starting to change. You're starting to see this long view capital, this infrastructure fund type of capital coming to play and starting to invest in the model. I mean, Canada's been doing it forever. Europe's been doing it forever. Australia's been doing it forever. That, I think, is really one of the keys, combined with the innovation and technology, that's allowing us to think for 30-year terms and not have to worry about a 5 to 7 year time horizon, which is what an individual facility or an individual investor might focus on. By being able to take that longer view, you can do things that are innovative. But back to something that Bill said, we're not about making our clients guinea pigs. We're about finding innovative technologies that have some level of commercialization behind them and also allow us to continue to build upon them so that we're not stuck in 15 years with a legacy system that we then have to live with.
Okay. Thank you, Dave.
I have a question for you. So some people in the community have asked for not just zero net energy, but providing, for example, free electricity or electricity to the residents in some shape or form. So is there any examples you can give of where developments that you've known of or worked on have provided a surplus of energy that is a community benefit?
I've seen it be... There's been surplus energy provided back into the grid. Tying that energy back to a specific user is problematic, and some of that goes to the actual regulatory framework around it about basically selling energy or giving energy across property lines. You start to get into the franchise of the utilities. So there's a regulatory hurdle to it. There's a technological hurdle about how do you actually deliver that energy. Are we going to be building transmission wires into the community to actually take it there? There's ways of doing it on paper. So there's community choice aggregation programs, which I've gotten very big up here. That's sort of the only tool I can think of right now that goes there. I would say the community benefits around the energy, and I'll preface this by saying I'm relatively new to the team here, so I haven't had all these discussions with everyone yet. But there are things about creating these areas where you can have redundancy and resilience and reliability and potentially look at using some of those assets to stabilize the overall grid. So that could be a conversation with PG&E and say, well, what do you need for the rest of the community here? And is there a way that we can marry some of those needs with the assets that we want to build on site? But we haven't had those discussions yet.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, great. You can sit down now. Is there any other questions for the other consultants? We will have another chance at the end to ask questions. Did you have some?
No more.
Okay. So, great. So thank you for those presentations. We've covered half of them now. And so at this point, we can take a 5-minute break, or we can keep going. Anybody have any preferences?
If we could take just a 5-minute break.
Okay. I think that'd be good. All right. 5 minutes. Thank you.